Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started in just a couple minutes here. We are just waiting for a few more folks to be in the room with us. Thanks so much for already being online, to all of our Zoomers, and we will get there in just a second.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Working Group for the Relief of Connecticut Borrowers. Today is Monday, August 25th, and it's around 11:04. Thank you all who are online for being here. Thank you for my fearless partners here in the room. I know that my co-chair, Representative Corey Paris, will be here shortly, but we did want to go ahead and just get started. My hope is that I'm not going to make a lot of comments because we want to get right into all of the materials. My hope is that you did receive the materials ahead of the meeting, and we want to make sure that we have a time to go through as much of the documents that we have. We had the marketing plan from the student leaf. I'm having a moment there. Student loan reimbursement program, and also it's the document about the federal aid state, the changes to the ongoing beautiful big whatever it was called act that is scaring so many people and causing a lot of issues when it comes to student loan debt. So I want to start by going over some of the materials provided by the Office of Higher Education. And I believe Christian, our wonderful clerk, if he can correct me if I'm wrong, that's the federal student aid changes from the big beautiful bill, right? So for those of you at home, we have a chart that has basically broken down by category. We've got some Pell Grant information, federal direct loan program information, student loan repayment information, need analysis, institutional accountability, and student eligibility, as well as some miscellaneous points on the bill. And I'm hoping that either our friends from OHE, either Noel or Ram, might be here to kind of walk us through some of these changes. I think that they might be our best bet to walk us through. Noel, I don't know if you want to take it or.
Well, you know what? I'm not sure we provided that to you guys.
Okay.
So,
I actually provided that
Sorry.
information.
And
Um,
welcome our wonderful ombuds person for student loan debt, Michelle Jarvis Letman. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind walking us through some of it, because it really is heavy and we want to make sure that we are getting
it's
as
very heavy.
I think that for any borrowers or future borrowers, these are really, really critical points that are being made in this document. So if you can
Sure.
kick us off,
Yeah,
thank you.
sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I sent this info. I know it encompasses everything besides student loans, but I thought it just really was the one thing that made sense right now to kind of just show all the changes. My office is working on breaking down each of these changes for borrowers. We'll have some webinars and presentations later on throughout the year as these continue to come up. But some of the biggest ones I think that are on this that we talked about, I think in the last meeting, was the plus changes. That's Parent Plus and Grad Plus. Grad Plus loans are getting eliminated as starting July 1st, 2026. So that's anybody going into the professional field, medical, dental, lawyers. They're not going to have access to federal funding outside of the normal because they're getting rid of this plan altogether. The caveat to that is if you have a student or borrower that's in school right now, they will still have access to these funds to have the next 3 years to finish out their degree and using the Grad Plus loans. Parent Plus loans are going to be restricted to $20,000 per academic year for borrowing limits per student, with an aggregate limit of $65,000 a year, or total. I'm sorry, the $65,000 would be total for that student, which really it hinders students and parents because the cost is so high for higher education. So this will limit to the amount that parents can borrow for students. The lifetime limits are changing as well. So those are going up to $257,500 for the total lifetime of the student as well. There's limits on students who are going part-time. So that will go based on the institution and what their costs are. And so if a student is only taking 6 credits and they're a first-year student, they may not have access to the full 5,500 that they're eligible for based on this bill. So that really is going to put pressure back on the institutions to make sure they're adjusting cost of attendance and not giving them the full eligibility amount, which has That's a huge difference over the years. Students have been eligible for their full eligibility as long as they're a half-time student, and this really will change kind of the makeup and impact for those students as well. In terms of repayment, it's a complete overhaul. Again, my office is really trying to break down these changes based on who or when a borrower took out their loan. So we have a pocket of students that started borrowing before 2014. We have borrowers that are from 2014 2000 to present, and then we're going to have borrowers starting in July 1st, 2026. So those are kind of the three pockets of areas when it comes into repayment plans where people are going to be eligible for, and what can happen at some point. According to the bill in 2028, there are only going to be 2 repayment plans. So at some point or another, everybody's going to have to push to one of 2 plans based on this bill. But there are multiple plans right now for other borrowers who currently are in repayment that they'll have options for, and what makes sense for them before they get stuck into one plan or another. This document goes into a lot of detail of it, and I'm happy to take questions on if there's certain questions on what payment plan makes sense. But like I said, we're really trying to break this down so it's easier than this chart. I obviously did not have enough time for this meeting, but we're continuing to work on this. The one thing I will say that is very important right now, and one of our focus points is for Parent Plus loan borrowers. They are losing options for repayment plans. They're going to be stuck in the standard plan, especially if they don't consolidate, if they're a borrower right now at this moment in time. New Parent Plus loan borrowers starting in 2026 are only going to be having the option for the standard repayment plan. That's a huge change. Standard plan does not count towards PSLF as well. So Parent Plus loan borrowers are really getting boxed in terms of the repayment options that other borrowers have, some of the flexibilities, borrowing for a federal Parent Plus loan made it favorable for parents, especially if they were going towards PSLF to help their student. And now that with these changes, that's starting to take that away from them. So that will be something to keep in mind when we're talking to Parent Plus loan borrowers. The other, I guess, good thing that came out of the bill was students will have the opportunity to rehab their loan twice if they go into default. Right now, it's just a one-time thing. But with this bill, when it takes into effect, it will, and that's in 2027, will be 2 times. We don't want students, obviously, to get into the default category, but it does happen. Now they'll have the option of being able to come out of that twice. So I would say that's the one decent thing that came out of this, is that students will have that option to do that again. The other big thing with this bill is it's tiered in 3 different stages. So most of the changes are going to start, some of the changes are going to start as of July 1, 2026. Then you have some of the changes happening in 2027. And then by July 1st, 2028, kind of rounds it out, and then everything will kind of be officially in place. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts for borrowers. It's going to get very confusing, especially the borrowers who are, say, on the SAVE plan, for example, that is still stuck in court and in forbearance, but now accruing interest. They don't have to come off of SAVE right now until technically July 1st, 2028. But if they're trying to make payment, they're trying to reach PSLF, they might be able to change their plan multiple times before having to go to one of the new plans out of this bill. So we want to continue to work with borrowers, make sure they understand what plan works best for them, what makes sense. Like I said, they might be moving multiple times into different repayment plans, which can get confusing for them. But like I said, my office is going to be working with trying to really break this down for borrowers. We're going to be holding some info sessions to break down the options for borrowers, what makes sense for them, how this really plays out for them in the long run. And we're going to continue to wait for guidance from the Department of Ed as well to make sure that we're understanding what they're laying out in here, and that everybody's on the same page, and then we can move forward with the borrowers.
Thank you so much. It is a lot of information to have to try to get into a chart or coalesce for people. And I think, one of the biggest concerns I have coming out of what you said initially was that the graduate plus loans are going away. And I see Dr. Senator Anwar on the call. I just can't imagine how we are going to address a critical shortage of medical professionals without having access to that. And certainly, um, you know, education's not getting any cheaper and a medical school education is not getting any cheaper. So I'm not sure how or why the logic behind that to eliminate those loans is occurring. But I also really appreciate the fact that you're going to both be sharing more resources with us so that we can share them out to our constituents, whether it's by newsletter or social media posts, that sort of thing. And also, I think that, just the fact that you laid out that this is not all happening at once. And so just when you think you've figured out what you're supposed to be doing with your loan, it's going to change again and it could change a third time. So this is becoming unnecessarily complicated, in my opinion. But I just want to see if anybody else has any comments or questions for you at this time. Krister from our Student Loan Fund organization, please.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person today, but I am here and I wanted to make sure I also highlighted that kind of there is really no logic behind what's happening here, right? One of the things that they'll say is that, well, we want it to be more efficient, but this is actually not more efficient. They have let go of the majority by the Department of Education. So the processing of these applications, right? You have to follow the process. There's a process, and then somebody else has to process the paperwork that you submit, right? So there are going to be millions of borrowers who are going to be submitting new paperwork, trying to figure out what is going to be best for them. And so this is not efficient. This is not efficient, right? This is actually going to make it a lot worse for borrowers, and it's going to extend the repayment period, is going to limit repayment options for Parent Plus loan borrowers. And ultimately, all that is a lot of words for the fact that a lot of people are going to have to end up paying more out of pocket, will be in debt for longer, and will limit the ability of working class students to be able to go to college. We know that student debt is here because of lack of generational wealth, right? And so if you do not provide loans to students of low income, then they are some level of higher education accessibility, right? Then you are not going to be able to go to higher ed. And that is part of that process. And we know that the medical field is going to be one of the ones that is going to be most impacted, primarily primary care physicians, which we already know is an issue at the state level and at the national level. So I just wanted to highlight those key points, that it's going to be really important, because part of the work that we'll have to do internally in Connecticut is we're going to have to do some of that regulatory that the Department of Education and the federal government will not do. And so it's important to understand that these things are going to impact ability of working class people to go to college, and how long is going to trap people in debt for repayment. And in fact, even if the borrower does everything right, there's going to be so many hiccups along the way, because we are already seeing them with the delays in the applications, the reviews of the applications that are coming in, and the paperwork that's coming in by borrowers. So I just wanted to add that caveat, because I think it's important to understand what context we're working as a state, and happy to share more.
No, and we had already seen how when people didn't even realize that their loans were back, quote unquote, online, and losing hundreds of points of their credit rating overnight. I mean, that's my biggest concern moving forward, is people not knowing when it changes, and then maybe they're accidentally in default, or maybe they're, I mean, we shouldn't need to have 2 times of rehabbing. I'm glad that's in there, but I don't think we should need to have 2 times of that, because we don't want people to go into default. So thank you. Our partner in this work for the student loan reimbursement plan, Representative Nuccio.
Thank you. Michelle, I had a quick question for you. I've been looking at all of this too, and I understand the change with the Parent Plus loans. Have there been any conversations with the higher ed institutions? If you look at the amount of debt people have incurred when the federal loan program really kicked off, and when they changed their regulations to, looking at parent income since the age of 25, et cetera, like all these different things. Like, to me, it's been an issue that we've perpetuated to get people into more and more debt, right? And I think at some point the conversation has to be with the higher ed institutions to say, you need to bring the costs down, right? Like, we can't have like $50,000, $60,000 a year for these degrees, and that is what is perpetuating the amount of debt that people are in, the cost of higher education. So is the organization, are we working with them to start to look at, I say this because there's a news article that says UConn is cutting 7 programs, and it's an uproar, right? It's 7 programs with 6 people in them, and what's the amount of money that it costs to run those programs, right? We need to start looking for more efficiencies, and I think we need to use what we're learning from you guys, to kind of partner with the higher ed institutions to, they need to bring their costs down, right? Like there has to be a way to cut that admin out and bring their costs down. So are those conversations happening with you?
With me in my office, not a whole lot. Our focus is on student loans repayment and education on student loans. I think this topic came up a little bit on our last call too. You know, I, we have a, I think we have a great state college system.
We do,
The
you're
cost
right.
kind of, drives that. We have free community college. So I think if we all start collaborating more, even outside of maybe this working group and maybe having a subgroup of what can be done to push, the community college, way first, and then feeding into our state colleges and universities to help bring down some of those costs, those overall costs for our students. I use it for example, like, I have a junior in high school. I have a daughter. She's already considering like going out of state. And when we're looking, it's like it actually might be cheaper for you to go out of state, depending on, scholarships, funding, and things of that sort. So I think there's a big conversation that we should start having as we're talking about student loan debt, as we're talking about these things, because it all kind of, folds into one. And I'm happy to join in that conversation.
I think that'd be great because I think we have to really start looking at this holistically and not cherry pick, right?
Mhm.
Like we can't cherry pick here. We have to be looking at how do we make education more affordable for more people without having to incur hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And I think you hit something very clearly on the head. The more we push our 2-year community college degrees with our guaranteed admission into other CSCUs, stuff like that, like that is a direct way to reduce your debt, and get a degree out of this. So I've been trying to have that conversation for a while. So if you want to listen, I'm all in. Let's have the holistic conversation. And I think we also have to look at something your area, I'm assuming at some point will start to kind of help with, is educating people on what does it mean when you're 18 years old and you're taking out, $60,000 in student loans for a college experience, or, what does this mean from a payback perspective? Instead of getting to the point where we're looking for forgiveness, how will we get into this mess, right? And how do we kind of educate people to do this in a better manner? So I'm hoping at some point we can kind of progress you as the ombuds there to, how do we educate the populace on what to do and what not to do?
Yep, that is one of the goals that I have for the office as well. Is it's not just about repayment, it's about the process starting when you're looking at colleges and universities, how that looks like. I mean, it really should start even, before that, like 529 savings plans, like looking at, full cost of attendance, not just tuition and fees. We have books, we have housing costs, meals. There's all these things that encompass in going off to college, whether you go off to college, whether you stay at home. So what we're trying to do as we're building out some of our programming is having those in-depth conversation, breaking down even the FAFSA application. What does that look like for you? This is what it's going to give you, and this is what you're going to have to do outside of that. We have some great resources in this state with scholarship lists and different resources that I don't think are being utilized and promoted as much as well. Millions of dollars get left on the table in terms of scholarships. So trying to, again, like pull everything together into one like centralized location for families, borrowers, students, parents to be able to access these different information while they're making that college journey.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Paris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Nuccio, just to your point, and I think that the Budswoman had clearly articulated very eloquently just in terms of some of the challenges. So I certainly understand your point in terms of us needing to ensure that college is more affordable here in our state and across the country. The issue, and I can say this from personal experience, I was an out-of-state student that came from Kansas to go to school here in Connecticut. And when I finally came onto campus, I thought my financial aid covered everything, uh, everything, including housing and meal plan, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing it covered was my core classes. That was it. So I had no housing. Uh, and I had to choose between housing or the meal plan that first year. And I did not choose the meal plan because housing was obviously more important and you figure out how to eat somewhere along the way as an independent student. So for many of our young people, once they take out these loans and then they realize that there is a balance that is still due or a balance that will be owed to them in excess of what they've taken out for the loan, many people, the vast majority of those students in those families have applied those remaining funds to either a meal plan or travel home or off-campus housing because it is too expensive to live on campus. So no matter what they do, they still need that money to help offset the other growing costs associated with their higher academic career. So I just wanted us to point to that as well as a need because we would expect for many of them to just give the money back, but it's almost impossible for them to do that when they're in a pinch and a bind. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think that's part of, again, like the education piece that I think we need to, these kids have to have an idea, right? They have to know. And when you are taking that money, my daughter, when she went for her doctorate, same sort of thing. When she got the money back, it was to pay for her off campus. She's a doctoral student, she's going to be a doctor. She didn't have housing. But that comes part of your loan. You're paying interest on that, right? And I don't think, like you said, a lot of these 18-year-old kids or even 22-year-olds who are taking out these loans fully understand that. We have to do a better job of educating them of what this is, what's going to be covered, what's not going to be covered, what you're going to incur, what you're not going to incur. What does the long-term payment on that look like?
And to your point, and I totally agree with you. I think it's not just the students, but I think it's also the parents. And I think for many parents, they just want to get their kids off to college. I don't think they understand um, effectively what they're signing up for. They think that they're just getting the money and that's that. And they'll just figure out a way to pay it off because they just want to afford their young person with this opportunity. So I totally agree with you on that. It's definitely an education of the student, but also the parents as well. But how we educate parents around this issue may be quite challenging and difficult. As you know, we don't want to certainly seem that we're trying to have a takeover in any way whatsoever, but to arm them with the information for them to be fully aware, I think is our best possible bet moving forward.
I agree. I would layer on to that, Corey. I think we have to have some sort of responsibility for the
signatures.
Irene, you're not on mute. Have the higher ed education, the units have to have some sort of responsibility for that too, right? But especially like in the case that you're saying, you didn't have housing, you didn't have a food plan and all of that. What role does the university take in that? This has got to be holistic. We have to be looking at the responsibility of all of these areas. And holding the schools responsible for making sure that people understand the level of debt they're taking out and what they're going to get and what they're not going to get also. So I think holistically, we're on the same page here, you and I. I think we just really have to look, everybody who touches this, what's the role and how do we make sure that they're educated?
Senator Anwar, followed by Senator Lesser.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of comments and I have a question as well. First, I just wanted to share that this HR 1 is going to have long-term impact. This is going to be a generational loss for people. What we will see is that individuals who have the full capacity to get the highest level of education, postgraduate education, they will be making a choice not to move in this direction. So this is actually strangling the future of our society and strangulate the future of our next generation of leaders in educational world. So it's somewhat a sad situation that we are going to be living in. This bill is about money. It's not about rehabilitating the healthcare system and institutions. So I think that conversation relating to HR 1 is probably going to be deflecting us from what is in front of us right now. Perhaps we can expect the federal government to do something on the bills for education system and higher education, but that's not what is in this bill at this time. It is just basically restricting opportunities for the next generation. So I just wanted to make that point and also share that we are already every year, the Public Health Committee, we are writing these bills to try and get the next generation of workforce. We do not have nurses, we do not have physicians, we do not have primary care, we do not have specialists right now at this time. Now, what this does is it actually is going to make sure that the next generation of people who are truly interested will not move in that direction. So how are we going to be able to do this? So I'm just I cannot understand the lack of wisdom, how far it goes to make some of these policies. The question I had was that one of the parts on this is about the hardship and unemployment deferments, sunsetting them, and also the forbearance capping. It almost looks like it's a financial institutions that wrote this bill, and it's nothing to do with education. It's more to make the financial institutions richer. Is that a right understanding that I have, Michelle? Perhaps if you can weigh in on this.
I would say yes, because like, as you mentioned, for things happen, right? Life happens to our borrowers where they need a few months to figure this out and kind of put my loans on pause for a moment. And taking that away doesn't help anybody, like you said, but the financial institutions, but the loan servicers, which then I think turns into why we are going to see the two rehabs for default, because they're expecting that to happen, right? Because there isn't going to be that forbearance. It's going to sunset. So what's going to happen? We're going to put you into default. We put you in default. Guess what? We can garnish your wages now. So I think it was all kind of tied into their bigger plan of just taking and not actually working for the borrower and for the benefit of the borrower.
And thank you so much for clarifying that. I just want to add what this is doing is that this sets people up, the rich to get richer, because education has been one of the most powerful equalizing factor where any individual who is in a low opportunity area, when they get educated, they become at the same level as a person who lives in high opportunity areas. But this HR1, with the current things that at least I'm seeing in the first read, suggests that the rich will have the opportunity and they will get richer, and the ones who are less opportunity areas or individuals with less resources, their chances of getting education is going to be far lower, higher education especially. And there's a ripple effect on economy, but also on real estate. Even the real estate organizations, they've been looking at this and they say if people cannot pay their student debt, they're not going to get more debt. They're not going to buy a home. So we will see an effect that is going to be far beyond education into what this HR1 has done. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And I'm so glad for the leadership of the leadership of this group to bring us in this conversation, because we owe it to the current generation and the next generation to see what we can do to help out in the state of Connecticut when such poor priorities are being set up at the federal level at this time. So thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And, that's why we often call our student loan reimbursement plan the economic participation bill, because we know that people are already struggling with what you just mentioned in terms of being able to buy a house, buy a car. If you don't have a car, how do you get to work? For a lot of people are not able to use public transportation because their job isn't on a line for public transportation. Senator Lesser.
Yeah, I thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to echo the.
Senator, oh, there you are. Where your sound is going a little in and out, so just be aware.
Okay, I was just going to say, and hopefully you can hear me, that that higher education was an experiment that this country, millions of things. How do we serve that? We keep the economy from going into tailspin with all these folks out of work, and we did an educating the in the 1960s, or at least the men, mostly men, from not certainly not entirely. And then in the 60s, with the Higher Education Act, President great, we looked, but Congress wanted to do it on the cheap. So rather than pay for college as we had with the GI Bill, they created a system of student loans. But the idea was to strengthen the U.S. economy, to advance the right of every American. I'm frustrated that my friends are deep in debt. A lot of folks that I know, both for themselves, for their kids, for their, is a real problem. But I'm really worried right now. We have a new system that's emerging, which is the old system, the system from before World War II, where only rich people. And that would be really terrible for us. I think we have to think about it. I totally hear the I think we also think
Senator Lesser, we are really struggling to hear you at this point, but we
I'll
do appreciate.
thank you, Madam Chair.
We did get some of the gist of it. Representative Dillon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much for this conversation. It's huge though. And so I just want to take out one separate little topic that was mentioned early on. We have 3 medical schools in Connecticut that are losing or not getting paid by the National Institute of Health. Their students are going to be capped, and they provide a very critical force in terms of our workforce statewide. I don't want that to intrude on the larger question, but it is a part of the larger question. And since the revenue that they're losing, which may include international students, by the way, we don't know where all this is going to go. It also includes capping of indirect costs. So all of these things are cutting into revenue of a particular subset, as well as the rest of higher education. So I just want to suggest that we maybe asterisk that group of UConn, Yale, and Quinnipiac med schools as workforce issues that may have separate, more complex issues, if that's, well, everything here is complex, but just wanted to mention that. And I'm so grateful for the initiative that you've shown here and for the talent that you're bringing to the table.
Thank you so much, Representative Dillon. I think we have exhausted, we have Cecil with us. So go ahead when you are ready, sir.
Hey, thank you so much, Madam Chair, and everybody else in the committee. Again, I'll reintroduce ourselves and reintroduce my team that's here. We are at the UConn, so as Congresswoman was talking about education institutions, we're at UConn Health. We are housed in the School of Medicine. We are the Connecticut Area Health Education Training Center, and we provide workforce development for the entire state through our 4 regional centers. And one of them is running a parallel student loan repayment program, which we have been successful, and we'll continue to share our findings and our lessons learned from that program with everybody else here. The one thing that we wanted to just tag is, we are working in our communities day in and day out. And one of the challenges that we have faced, and that's coming up repeatedly through all our pipeline programs, and we work with students from as young as 7th grade all the way until they're fully participating in the workforce, either as doctors, nurses, social workers, the whole 9 yards in biomedical research and healthcare. One of the things that we've learned is from the employer standpoint, we also need to get the employers invested in our, for the kind of workforce we're doing is really apprentice workforce. And there's a lot of misinformation around what services and support financial services employers can provide into the employees. Services that the state has already approved, like the CHES program that was approved that Chesla is running. One of the things that we've learned is, only about 2 organizations are participating in that student loan repayment program. If we are to really truly do a dent to the kinds of debt we're seeing in healthcare, we're going to need everybody else, all all the healthcare organizations in our state participating in those programs. We don't know what the gap is between the programs that the state has already approved and what employers are receiving, but being able to work with folks that are on this call to also work with our employers to get them to understand that those financial services you're providing for loan repayment, for education support for your employers could be used to mitigate some of the costs that are in higher education. I think that would do a huge dent to some of the education costs challenges we're seeing. But that's one of the areas that we're now beginning to ramp up our work to work with employers to make sure they understand what stake they have, particularly in apprenticing careers. As we're also ramping up our work to work with loan services to make sure folks understand the obligation to this issue. And then again, lastly, to just lift up something that our friends at the Hartford Foundation have done is, looking at college resiliency is now something to be thinking about in terms of financial incentives. So thinking about the continuum of education costs, not just the cost of attendance, but what does it take to actually keep someone else you're taking from Danielson, Connecticut, and bringing them to Western Connecticut? What does it take to keep them in that school, in that program? And that does require that universities incur costs for mentorship, for coaching, for placements, and those services are already some of our employers are already providing them. We just need to connect them. But I think our friends at the Hartford Foundation put out a report that I encourage everybody else to read. We are certainly reading it so we can grapple with what kinds of what the framework would mean for our programs. But that's something I just wanted to offer up to the group. Two things: getting our employers buy into all this stuff that we're doing, and then also thinking about college readiness on a continuum of other services that could be amplified with community support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And if you wouldn't mind sharing that report with me or with Representative Paris or with Christian, who's the initial documents, we will get that out to the rest of the working group, that report from Hartford Foundation, so that we can all see it and learn from it. So we do want to move on to the second half of the review of our materials, which is discussing the student loan reimbursement program that we have here in Connecticut. We have just relaunched it, and we are very excited to see that people were anxious to have it back, anxious to reapply, in some cases apply for the first time. And so now I can say, Noelle, I don't know if you want to kick it off or if Ram wants to kick it off. We do have quite a bit of financial information about the money that we have already dispersed and the demographics around those dollars that I think is really important for us to go over as well.
Thank you.
Representative Paris is just reminding me, Maryland has now passed and duplicated the program in the state of Maryland. So we were ahead of everybody else, but people are duplicating it as we speak because of things like HR 1. Take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to defer to Ram Abarasturia, who is the division director in our office of finance, and he oversees the program. So Ram, take it away.
Sure. Thank you for that. Noel. So we went back live on August 5th. August 15th, and the amount of the requests that we've received, has been amazing. As of within the last 6 days, we've received hundreds of applications. With respects to the emails, we've had over 3,000 applications already received. So within the last 6 days of this, let's assume everyone would qualify for the maximum benefit. We would be putting out into reimbursements a little over 1 million, well, technically 1,322,815. So the work that you guys are doing, with this legislation, has been tremendous. Obviously, the first 6 months, we put out a little over 1.4 million. As of right now, we're looking at 1.3 within just 6 days, and those numbers are just going to exponentially, explode. So kudos again to you and Madam Chair and this group as well, because we're helping a lot of students here in Connecticut.
Thank you so much. No, we are very excited about this. I just wanted to for the people at home who don't have the report sitting in front of them, I wanted to reference the fact that we had people from 18 up until 70. Our largest number of applicants that were able to receive were between 18 and 30. We had 276. The average reward was around 2,763. As a reminder, they could have received up to $5,000, but it was based on what they had paid into their loan last year. They can receive up to $20,000 over the course of 4 years. Our next largest group was between 31 and 40. That was 187 people. Total funds, $468,395. And that average reward was around 2,500. So the good news is that, while people may not have paid fully up to $5,000, these average awards are allowing more people to participate in the program. And we are really grateful for that. Representative Paris, I don't know if you want to go over a little bit about some of the changes that we implemented between the first time we did this and the second time, or some of the other information, but just wanted to give you the opportunity.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I certainly appreciate the Office of Higher Education for all of their hard work on this. This was a bipartisan effort, of course. As you know, we've expanded some of the eligibility requirements. One in particular that was quite important to us was a waiver for those who are facing hardship. And so there was one person in particular in our state, one story that sticks out of the many. We heard from many people who had expressed support for this waiver, if you will. And essentially, one person was suffering from stage 3, stage 4 cancer, could not get all of the hours completed on their own, but this waiver would allow for them to be able to opt out of that piece while still being able to satisfy all of the other eligibility requirements. It also gave a broader range of volunteer experiences. So Representative Cavros DeGraw, the good chair, co-chair of this committee, of this working group, had much experience working and hearing from folks who were volunteer firefighters, volunteer EMT folks who weren't able and eligible to use their hours for this. I heard from a grandfather out of Washington Depot who coaches his grandson's Little League team and was not allowed to use that. And now that he can use it, it's going to bring a lot of promise to him to be able to complete this program. And he was in his mid 60s, early 70s. So that money for him and his wife is going to definitely pay off dividends moving forward. So I'm just really excited to see all of the changes that we have made. There was also a provision to assist former Stone Academy students that were impacted by the school's sudden closure. And students who did not receive a tuition refund or participate in the local official teach out plan are also eligible for this reimbursement under this program. And we were happy to work with the honorable chairs of the Higher Education Committee, both in the House and in the Senate, Senator Slaff and Representative Haddad, on that request as we move forward to expand the program. My biggest thing is that for those who start the application process but do not complete the application process in one sitting, it is really important that we know how you're going back to encourage them to complete the application so we can ensure that they are getting access to that forgiveness. Because while we do have, we do hold about $20 billion in student loan debt right here in the country, in the state, and that's gone up over $1.5 billion over the last year or so. It is important for us to make sure that money is being immediately injected back into our economy. And I think what people have to also realize, and when we're talking about this, why the reimbursement and getting the reimbursement out the door back into the hands of borrowers is so important, is because I've heard from folks in my district and in districts of my colleagues who have parents that are in their 80s that are experiencing hits to their credit scores, going from the high 800s or mid 800s down to the low or mid 500s because they didn't know that, they were being targeted or that their loans were coming up due again. The other thing is, we may think, and this I think is in the eye of the beholder, that a certain level of income is a lot of money. But when you think about the take-home pay, which has not changed in our state and across the country in quite some time, many folks who may be making, $100,000 or at the threshold of $125,000, what we're seeing with this program, they're still dealing with high cost of housing, high cost of transportation, high cost of food. Childcare may be in the mix. But the other thing is that their average repayment is somewhere above $800 or more a month. And that's unpredictable to highlight or forecast what that might be in the coming years under the federal changes. So just things that we need to be mindful of as we move forward, but certainly more important for us to be pushing this effort more and more as we move along. Thank you, ma'am.
And I would just remind people that the reason in terms of that salary, where we put it at $125,000. $100,000 is considered in some places to be a middle class salary in majority of places, but in Connecticut, that could even be below middle class in terms of a salary. I know that is hard for people to think about, hard information to take in, especially those of us who might be on the older end of the spectrum. But I think that it's really important for us to recognize that and to also remember that the cost of college is so far outside of inflation that when people are taking out these loans, that's why they're taking out more and more significant loans, because it is outside of inflation. And, when I talk to some of my friends who are more in the baby boomer generation about how they were able to, work at McDonald's and spend, a few $100s a semester to be able to go to college. I mean, I just look at the difference. One of my daughters actually went to my alma mater, and I look at the difference of what 4 years cost for me. And that total for 4 years was what 1 year cost for her. So, I mean, that's that, and that's over about a 27-year, difference. So I think it's really something that we have to be thinking about, of course, every time. Any comments or questions about the student loan reimbursement program from the folks online? Anything else we want to just highlight? Kristen?
Yeah, I
Oh,
just
sorry.
want
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off Representative Paris's comments. Just fresh numbers here with regards to the hardships. Again, a great change in that in legislation there. We received 49 applications, so we're going through that process, and in that process, we'll be able to help additional people that we wouldn't have been able to help without that legislation change. The other point that was raised is with regards to making sure that we follow up with people that haven't filled out, every piece of the applications. So ultimately, when there's the different sections, as those sections, are filled out, we get notifications. Before we close out, the year, we always communicate with those applicants to ensure that they are responding, by the deadline to ensure that, we're able to complete as many applicants or applications as possible. Thank you for that.
And Rob, just quickly, something that could be helpful, I think helpful information that could be a good visual for the working group is if you and your team at OHE, if you would be willing to reach out to applicants in each
Section?
yeah, I'm sorry, what would you say?
Oh, demographics, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in each demographic around income eligibility.
Okay.
So if we see the higher end, middle end, and the lower end, and then just if we could get their permission, just we don't need their names, but just to have an outlook of how much money they make in their jobs, and also just to have a rough estimate of what their bills and expenses look like that on top of their loans. I think it will be helpful and eye-opening for the committee to see. Lord, I'm sorry. Freudian slip. I keep saying committing, I mean working group. For the working group to see that, making $100,000, you're only getting a net pay of, $2,700 each paycheck, and where that money goes to, and then seeing it, in different avenues. Excuse me. I'm very tired. My apologies. It would be really helpful for us to see, just so that we can have a better visual of putting real life experiences to some of the work that we're doing here.
Understood. We'll circle back.
That's great.
Yep. Just to follow up to that, do you take into account or categorize what the debt ratios are as a function of an ability to pay, and then utilize that for a tool to try to lay out the roadmap of how you're going to get to where you can get to when it comes to actually financing the education? Because the debt ratio will tell you an awful lot and give you a good projection going down the road.
That may be a better question for our ombudsperson, and we can absolutely have that conversation with her. I think that that's really valuable in terms of us maybe, future educating. And I was even thinking while she was talking, something similar to what you're saying is, perhaps we could have her come out to some of our districts to have this conversation ahead of people paying for. I mean, I think it would be a valuable tool for parents, our constituents, to have these conversations about how to look at those things before they take the loans.
Yeah, I concur with you, Madam Chair, because really when you start thinking about it, it is an obligation just as buying a home. It is an obligation just as buying a car, albeit it's got a long-term return, but you have to be able to actually budget your money and figure out exactly what you need to be able to get to that end goal and have what you have, a successful education and a successful life. So
And
I concur.
And I would say, and unlike your home or your car, unfortunately, those interest rates were moving around. And so without that regulation of those, of those interest rates, it's a little bit different, when we hear the argument of, well, you have to pay back your car loan or you have to pay back your house loan. It's a little bit different because we do have people who were under one impression when they took the loan and then under a different impression by the time they had to pay the loan in some
Exactly.
cases.
And a debt ratio can be a moving target also.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was Representative Dalnicki for those who didn't get to hear that up front. Krister, please go ahead. Krister Perez.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think part of what I wanted to hit on, I think it's really sage and important that we're talking about the difference, and I'm glad that it came up here, the difference between income and wealth. Income is one thing, but wealth is a very different thing, right? And our ability to, you can have a good income, but if you do not have wealth amassed, right, that does not actually transcend to you actually being able to, particularly in a state like Connecticut, that is such an expensive state for folks to live in already, right? We know of the higher cost of living. We know the housing issues that we're experiencing, buying, let alone renting, let alone buying. So I think when we're having conversations about what looks quote unquote good on paper, we need to take into account the context of the state that we live in, how expensive the state that we live in is. We have to take into account the fact that there's a difference between the income that you are earning at this moment versus the wealth that maybe your family or yourself has accumulated over the years, because that has a different barometer on your ability to make different choices. Right? Because even the conversation about personal responsibility, some of us are going to have to sign that dotted line if we want to have access to higher education, because we do not come from money and we come from either abject poverty, low income families, low income households. So if we want to be able to access an education, we have to be able to sign that dotted line, with the other option being, particularly in states that, yes, we invest more than other states in higher education, but if you look at the difference between what we give in grants as a state so that people do not have to get student loans, then what we are actually doing is, by not providing those grants that are free and that you don't have to pay back, and we're investing heavily in our higher education while keeping higher education institutions accountable for their costs in pricing. If we do not do that, then what we are actually doing is putting the responsibility of this education, that, by the way, is a collective good, because we're talking about this is not just a car that you're driving, although a car that you're driving is really important for you to get to work and to be able to provide for your local economy. It is not the same thing as being able to go to college, to become an educator, to become a nurse, to become a doctor, right? This is a public good that you are then giving to other folks, that you are providing to your communities. So I think part of the conversation is, when we're having conversations about how do we fund this, is if we do not provide grants in one end, then we are actually leaving borrowers to do nothing but borrow more money to be able to access education. And to say that, how do we finance our way through it or think through it, some people are just going to have to sign that dotted line because they do not have generational wealth. It is the same issue that happens with Chesla. Chesla is a great resource, but it is very limited because a lot of people get denied because they do not have that generational income or access to something like a credit score that they can utilize. And that has its own impact. So I wanted to name that because I think that's really important conversation as we're moving through more holistic, because I agree, what does this holistic approach look like to really dealing with this multi-level issue? So just wanted to add that to that.
No, and that's really critically important, because we do, the pushback on this that we always hear is, well, it's your loan, you should pay it, or you shouldn't have taken it out if you couldn't afford it. And, there are people who took out a loan and they have more than paid back what the loan was originally for. But again, unlike your house or your car, you are just paying and paying and paying, and the interest can be seemingly endless, or else we wouldn't have people who are in their, 70s to 80s who are going to need this reimbursement. And again, some of those are Parent Plus loans that were hanging out there for a while, certainly. But I think that as we continue to encourage people that the most important thing is to go to college in order for them to have long-term earning power and to be able to start building generational wealth and to succeed. And remember, if folks aren't going to college and getting the jobs that, college educations fill, what jobs are they ending up in? They're ending up in jobs that do not pay them enough. And then they do become, quote unquote, a burden on everyone else because of the services they might need. It might be SNAP. It might be, some kind of housing voucher, whatever it is, Medicaid, et cetera. So this really is, again, it's economic participation that we are talking about in order to try to lift people up from even the situation of what these loans is pushing down on them. Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for recognizing me. Sorry about the banjo clock in the background. I just wanted to really acknowledge what Krister just said about shifting the public good and the public responsibility of higher education, privatizing it to for-profit loan servicers and off of what had been traditionally and in most other many other developed countries, and is why they're ahead of us, is a public good that higher education is provided for students. And I personally would like to take that back to the public good and stop making profit for loan servicers out of state who are taking those profits and investing them somewhere else and not in our state. So this federal bill is a huge blow and is privatizing this industry, which never should have been privatized in the first place, and is shifting the public good onto very often very young students to be debt burdened for their whole life. And that is the point, and that is deliberate, and that is deliberately keeping people out of public good service jobs like social work and health sciences, like you said, research, all kinds of things. And it's going to cripple our economy and our future. Thanks.
Representative Hughes, just one point to make there, and back to what Chris was saying. I think we don't recognize enough how much of our daily lives are affected by student loan debt. Car insurance rates, believe it or not, are actually set because of the debt that you hold from student loans. So when you even just go in to buy the car, you're going to have a higher interest rate no matter what because of the debt to income ratio. But then when you go to insure the car because of the student loan debt, and that's not necessarily specific, but that's the biggest indicator since it is the largest amount of debt that is held in the nation right now, higher than even credit card debt. It makes it very difficult for anyone to do anything. And if you think about it with housing applications, with loan applications, and we think of the FICO score model, all of that is particularly around the student loan debt. I think what we should also ask OHE to do, in addition to us seeing a blanket imaginary person, of a real person who's applied for this program, just their expenses, I think it's also important for us to see that in a very blind trust way of how that appeals with men versus women, and then also in addition to race and geographic standing as well, because I think that also has a major correlation in terms of how we're thinking about this work, because it will look differently for everyone based on that access. And it will also be able to basically determine generationally the outlook and forecast of our state's financial sustainability in the future. So I just want us to be mindful of that. And that's also a request that I would ask for OHE to consider as we move forward. Thank you.
I'm going to have Cecil go next, followed by our ombudsperson for student loans. And I think those might be our last comments for today.
Yeah, thank you again. This conversation seems, for our team like a deja vu moment in things that we've been dealing with for the last couple of months. The way I want to start is, I don't want to acknowledge the fact about the debt ratio. So we did move to a debt ratio, prioritization within our scoring rubric for the student loan repayment program for primary care providers. So for our peers at OHE, if you're interested in seeing that, we'll be happy to provide some technical support to you in how we've calculated that. We've also run risk risk modeling thresholds to look at levels of indebtedness by, as Representative Corey was saying, by race, geographic area, and it's pretty shocking, but not as shocking perhaps if you've been around these parts as it might be, which leads me to the comment that I will make on we recognize by implementing our project that we can't just provide repayment without fighting for economic inclusion, so financial inclusion. Not everybody else is actually included in our financial systems the way we thought people were. So one of the pillars of our program is financial coaching and financial empowerment. And the other thing that's also come up is, you just can't do that without targeting, the, trauma, historic trauma that folks are bringing into this conversation. So we've also integrated within our loan repayment program, wellness coaching and our education programs that we provide to providers, which range from anything from as complex as managing, pediatric diabetes to, managing congenital syphilis. One of the things that almost everybody else has taken as part of our CM, professional development offering has been things around wellness. There's a lot of trauma that's going on within jobs because people are stuck in the jobs. So as you're thinking about this program and as we're thinking about this, thinking about what we can do on just occupational wellness might be something we should be looking at because there's a lot of stuff that we're dealing with in our program that has made us change to look at not just the financial assistance, but to look at other things that are around the financial assistance that can support people. And the last point I want to make is we learned that financial, loan repayment was taxable at the state level, and we worked with DPH and internal revenues to make sure that we knock that off. I'm not sure if this is true for this, financial benefit people are getting, but if it's not, that's also something you can anticipate people saying towards the end, as we have heard in our program before we lobbied for changing that. That's something that OHE must look into. If this money is taxable at the state level, it reduces the actual relief people are getting. Thank you.
We were not able to remove that this time, but I think there was. I'm trying to remember the exact reason why we were not able to, but
I think we just didn't have enough time.
we didn't.
So we will be happy to provide the language. Anybody else who's within healthcare adjacent employment, so you could be working in a school-based clinic, or you could be working in a substance use facility. If you're working in anything else that's healthcare adjacent and you're receiving student loan repayment through this vehicle, you should be able to get that waived. And we can provide you with the legal briefs that we worked with the state lawyers around that. Beyond healthcare, I don't know, but at least within healthcare and healthcare adjacent work, we did make sure that that was defined broadly and included everybody else who was within those fields.
Okay, thank you so much. And for our last comment today, Michelle, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you so much. For OHE, I just want to confirm what the timeline is for accepting applications and how long they're going to be open for. Just because our office has a newsletter, and I think I reached out to Noelle last time, and we want to keep promoting that. We send it out monthly, and we want to continue to feature that in our newsletter and on our website. So I just want to make sure I have the timeline correct so I don't overextend it or don't promote it enough.
Yeah, we'll circle back with you right after this meeting, Michelle.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I love to see our groups working together. It's good. It's good. So at this point, we are thinking about for our next meeting is going to be September 17th at 11 a.m. We hope that'll be just enough time to get some other speakers to come and share more information with us. But we really do appreciate so many of you being online today and moving forward. And Representative Paris, any closing thoughts?
No, and I just want to commend the good co-chair of this working group for doing a phenomenal job chairing. For the Office of Higher Education and also for the Student Loan Ombudsman's Office, if you all wouldn't mind providing us with what for the requests that we've asked you for by no later than September 5th, we'd be greatly appreciative of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we are adjourned.